Loretta Swit, forever known to the world as Major Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan, wasn't just a supporting player on MASH. She was the emotional core of the show, the only woman in the cast, the only one who never left, and the only one who kept something to herself. Because behind the laughter, the ratings, the Emmys, there was a dynamic on set that no one ever talked about. Not then. Not even when the cameras stopped. And for decades, Loretta didn't talk either. She was loyal, protective, grateful, until something changed. Until, in her 80s, she finally began to speak about how she really felt on that all-male set. The moments that left her shaken, and the pressure to be one of the guys, no matter the cost. She doesn't name names, but what she does say, says everything. There was one moment, off-camera, unexpected, that left her in tears. One she never forgot. And now she's finally telling us why. When MASH premiered in 1972, television had never seen anything like it. A war comedy that blended tragedy and laughter. A cast of eccentric surgeons, sarcastic soldiers, and one lone woman in the middle of it all, Major Margaret Houlihan, played by Loretta Swit. From the outside, it looked like Swit had landed the role of a lifetime. She was sharp, glamorous, commanding. Her character was tough as nails, respected, and never sidelined. But behind that strength, behind the confident walk and crisp uniform, Loretta Swit was entering a set where she was the only woman in a sea of men. And that reality shaped everything. By the time MASH found its voice in the second season, it was clear the show was becoming more than just a sitcom. The characters were evolving, the storylines were deeper, and the cast, most of them men, were forming a bond that often blurred the line between fiction and reality. But for Loretta, that camaraderie didn't always include her. She wasn't part of the poker games after filming. She didn't hang out with the boys in the dressing room. And although they laughed together on camera, there were moments, too many to count, where she felt like she was watching the party from the outside. It wasn't that she was excluded maliciously. It was more subtle than that. They called it a brotherhood. A set where jokes flew fast, boundaries were loose, and everyone was expected to take it all in stride. For Loretta, that meant brushing off the off-color jokes, smiling through the teasing, being a good sport even when something didn't feel right. She later admitted, in quiet moments, that it was a very male environment, and that she often felt like she had to protect her space without ever saying a word, because speaking up might have made things worse, might have gotten her labeled difficult. And for a woman in Hollywood in the 70s, that was the kiss of death. So she stayed quiet, focused, professional. She never missed a day, never made waves, and never let her discomfort show. Not on camera, and not in the press. The strange part? She loved the cast. She respected them. She still speaks about Alan Alda with affection. She saw Mike Farrell as a brother. But admiration doesn't erase the loneliness that comes from being the only one. And that loneliness left a mark. There was a scene in one of the earlier seasons, never identified by name, where her character was supposed to cry. But something about the moment hit too close. The lines blurred. The tears weren't just acting. And when the cameras stopped, Loretta stayed in her chair, wiping her eyes. No one said anything. She later confessed that it was one of the only times she felt the emotional toll of the job crack through. "I didn't want anyone to know," she'd say, "because if they knew I was hurting, they'd make a joke out of it." It wasn't cruelty. It was culture. And Loretta Swit knew she had to survive it on her own terms. She lasted the full 11 seasons. Others left. Wayne Rogers, Larry Linville, McLean Stevenson. But she stayed. And when the show ended, she was one of the few who had never walked away, not once. But even then, when they gathered to say goodbye, there was something Loretta didn't say. Not yet. As the years passed, the cast of MASH became legends. Their chemistry was undeniable. Their episodes, iconic. Behind the scenes, people spoke of camaraderie, laughter, long hours, and deep friendships. And for many of the men on set, that's exactly how it was. But Loretta Swit had a different vantage point. She saw everything from the center, but always from a slightly different angle. And what she saw sometimes troubled her. There were days when jokes on set crossed a line. Not cruel, not intended to harm, but built on a foundation that assumed a woman in the room would laugh along. Loretta always laughed. She had to. That was the expectation. But over time, those laughs chipped away at something quieter inside her. She never publicly accused anyone. She never pointed fingers. But what she described later in life wasn't about one moment. It was about a pattern. A culture where her ideas were often dismissed, where directors asked her to tone down the emotion, or make it sexier, or just go with it, and where her intelligence was sometimes underestimated, until she proved herself again, and again, and again. What stung most, Loretta later implied, was that she respected her male co-stars. She admired their craft, their commitment, and their wit, but they didn't always see her fully. They saw hot lips, not the woman behind her. And Margaret Houlihan, like Loretta, was never just one thing. In the beginning, the character was written as a caricature. An uptight, by-the-book military nurse with little depth and lots of punchlines. Loretta changed that. Quietly, strategically. She started infusing Margaret with dignity, with sorrow, with hidden vulnerability. She made her human, and the writers noticed. Slowly, they began to evolve the character. Gone were the one-dimensional jokes. In came the heart, the complexity, the respect. But that evolution didn't happen overnight. And during those in-between years, when Margaret was stuck somewhere between sex symbol and serious officer, Loretta carried the burden of both. She had to be beautiful and brilliant, strong and soft, seen and invisible. It was a balancing act that no one else on set had to perform. There were rumors, never confirmed, of one male guest star who made her deeply uncomfortable. A man who treated her coldly off-camera but flirted for the sake of the scene. Loretta didn't complain. She finished the episode, smiled at the wrap party, and never worked with him again. That was how she survived Hollywood in the 1970s. Even among the core cast, there were dynamics she learned to navigate. Alan Alda, beloved as he was, had a powerful voice on set. He directed. He rewrote lines. He carried weight with producers. Loretta respected him enormously, but it also meant she had to fight harder to get her voice heard. There were times she had to push back when scripts felt shallow. Times when she had to remind the team that Margaret deserved more. She never yelled, never stormed off. Her power was quiet, but it was there, and perhaps most heartbreaking of all. Even as the show neared its emotional, record-breaking finale, Loretta was still holding something in. There was one final table read. The cast sat in silence as the last episode unfolded. Tears ran down cheeks. Voices cracked. But Loretta didn't cry, not then. She waited until she got home, closed the door, and let go. Because what she was mourning wasn't just the end of a show. It was the weight she had carried, alone, for over a decade. And still, she didn't say a word. Not yet. Loretta Swit always said she believed in truth on screen. Not theatrics, not ego, just truth. And there was one scene on MASH. A scene that didn't make headlines, wasn't especially dramatic, and didn't even center on her character. That broke something inside her. Not because of what happened in the script, but because of what happened around it. It was a typical production day. The script called for a rare, quiet moment. Margaret in the background, watching a wounded soldier being treated. No punchline, no clever retort, just observation. But something about that moment caught her off guard. She stood there, fully in character, and suddenly, the noise of the set, the clatter, the laughter, the joking from nearby cast and crew, pulled her out of it. She saw it all at once. She wasn't included in the jokes. No one checked on her. And as she tried to refocus, she realized she was isolated. Still, after all these years, Loretta later described the moment without bitterness, but with pain. "They didn't even notice I was there," she said, not angrily, just with quiet resignation. She held her posture. She finished the scene, but something shifted, and when the cameras stopped, she stepped away, into the shadows of the set, and sat down. A crew member, someone young, not even close to the core group, was the only one who approached her. "Are you okay?" they asked. She nodded, smiled. "Just tired," she replied. But it wasn't just fatigue. It was emotional exhaustion. The kind that creeps in when you've spent years being both seen and unseen, valued and overlooked, admired and misunderstood. For a show that broke barriers, Loretta sometimes felt like she had to fight just to have her presence recognized. And yet, that fight never made her bitter. In fact, she became the cast member most dedicated to the show's legacy. She attended reunions, spoke about the importance of the stories they told, honored her co-stars with warmth and nostalgia. But the deeper story? She kept it buried for decades. What made it more painful was that Loretta wasn't just the only woman on the show. She was also one of its finest actors. Her work was subtle, layered, deeply emotional. Critics praised her performance in episodes like Margaret's Engagement and The Nurses, where she finally got space to show the complexity of her character. But those episodes were the exception, not the rule. There were stretches where Margaret was written thin again, reduced to her old hot lips persona, and Loretta swallowed it, because pushing back too often could have ended her time on the show altogether. Off-screen, she was dealing with her own personal heartbreaks, failed relationships, isolation, the feeling that no one really understood what it took to carry her role. Not just the character, but the space she occupied as the lone woman in a world of men. Years later, she said that MASH was the best thing that ever happened to her, but also the hardest. And that one scene, that quiet day on set when no one noticed her sadness, stayed with her. Not because anyone meant to hurt her, but because they simply didn't see. Years after the final episode aired, after the cast had scattered, awards had been handed out, and the show had cemented its legacy in TV history, Loretta Swit was invited to a MASH reunion special. It was meant to be a celebration, nostalgia, joy. And for the audience watching, that's exactly what it looked like. The surviving cast laughed together, shared stories, remembered the good times. And Loretta, as always, smiled graciously. She told a few jokes, hugged Alan, gave a tearful nod to the friends they'd lost. But something shifted after the cameras stopped rolling. The crew began packing up. Lights dimmed, the set emptied out, and Loretta, still in her seat, just stayed there, quiet, still, reflective. A producer walked over and said gently, "You okay, Loretta?" And for the first time, she didn't smile and wave it off. She nodded slowly. "I'm just remembering how I felt back then." The producer sat down with her, and what came next was something Loretta had never said aloud. Not in decades. "I loved them," she said, "all of them, but I was lonely. I always felt like I was standing in the middle of something and still somehow on the outside." She didn't cry, but her voice softened. "That set, it wasn't unkind, but it wasn't built for me." It was the first crack in the armor. The first time she allowed herself to say it. Not as an accusation, not with bitterness, but simply as truth. The emotional labor of being the only woman. The pressure to match the men in energy, humor, and stamina. The pressure to be liked. To not ruffle feathers. To absorb slights without reacting. That reunion special became a turning point. After that, Loretta began speaking more openly in private conversations, with friends, former castmates, even fans, about what it had really been like behind the scenes. Not to tear anyone down, but to finally tell her story. She revealed that while she adored Alan Alda, there were times she wished she'd been given the same level of creative respect. She said that Mike Farrell was a source of quiet kindness during harder days. But even he, she noted, didn't always understand what she was navigating. She mentioned a specific memory. A day when she asked the director to change one line, just one, because it made her character sound foolish. The director refused, said it was fine as written. But when Alan asked for a change 5 minutes later, it was approved without question. It wasn't just about lines. It was about respect. And respect, Loretta realized, was something she had to demand silently, because asking outright came with consequences. The reunion stirred up memories she had packed away for years, both beautiful and painful. She remembered McLean Stevenson's warmth, how he once told her she kept the heart of the show beating. She remembered Harry Morgan's quiet strength, his protectiveness. She remembered a night shoot when everyone else went back to the trailer, but she stayed out under the stars, needing the stillness after a long day. No one asked why. No one noticed she hadn't come in. And for all the good memories, and there were many, Loretta finally allowed herself to grieve the parts that were harder. That grief didn't make her story bitter. It made it real. She had stayed silent for decades to protect the image of something beloved. But now, in her 80s, she understood. Telling the whole truth didn't take away from the legacy. It only made it deeper. For decades, Loretta Swit carried a responsibility she never asked for, the responsibility to protect the memory of MASH, to preserve it, to defend it, not because anyone told her to, but because she wanted to. The show meant everything to her. It launched her career. It gave her purpose. It allowed her to reach into people's homes with stories that mattered, that saved lives, that made people laugh during dark times. And she knew, perhaps more than anyone, that if she spoke openly about the pain behind the scenes, it could fracture something sacred for the millions who had watched it with love. So she didn't. She kept the cracks to herself. The moments she felt dismissed, the tears she cried alone, the days she gave everything and felt like no one noticed. She kept it all locked away, tucked behind her smile. But now, in her mid-80s, something has changed. Loretta Swit no longer feels the need to protect the illusion. She wants to protect the truth. In recent years, she's spoken softly but honestly about her experience. Conventions, in interviews, in private conversations that fans have quietly shared. And what she says is never cruel, never accusatory. But it's clear. She was proud of her work. But the experience came at a cost. I was the only woman, she said. And no matter how close we were, I always felt that difference. She admitted that she didn't always feel safe being vulnerable. That crying on set, really crying, could be seen as weakness. That asking for more depth in her scenes was a risk. That any moment of dissent could be read as difficult. So she played the game, with grace, with intelligence, and with a quiet strength that so many never even saw. But when asked recently why she's decided to speak now, her answer was simple. Because I'm still here, and if I don't tell the full story, who will? It's not just about MASH. It's about every woman who's walked into a room full of men and felt unseen. About every actress who was told to be grateful but not too loud. Professional but not too opinionated. Beautiful but not too bold. Loretta Swit's story is not about bitterness. It's about balance. About honoring what was good, while finally allowing space for what was not. She still calls the MASH cast her family. She still watches old episodes. She still tears up when remembering the finale. But now, she also honors the truth beneath the surface. The complexity, the pressure, the things that were never said. There's one story she tells now, one she never told before. In the final season, after filming a particularly emotional scene, she sat quietly by herself as the rest of the crew cleared out. A young female production assistant walked by, stopped and said, "You're why I want to do this. You're the only one who looks like me." Loretta smiled, thanked her, and when the girl walked away, she cried. Not because she was sad, but because, in that moment, she realized the weight she'd carried had mattered. Her silence, her strength, her survival, it had meant something. Now, all these years later, Loretta isn't afraid to speak. Not to tarnish a legacy, but to complete it. Because the story of MASH isn't just what aired on screen. It's also what happened when the cameras stopped rolling, and what one woman carried long after the final cut. There's a reason Loretta Swit stayed with MASH until the very last frame. She wasn't just committed to the role. She was committed to the message, to the impact, to the lives the show touched and the pain it tried to ease through storytelling. And despite everything she endured quietly, despite the loneliness, the imbalance, the emotional cost, she never once walked away. She believed in it, even when it didn't always believe in her. And now, as she reflects on a lifetime of memories, Loretta isn't rewriting history. She's reclaiming it. She's finally letting us see the full picture. Not just the show that made us laugh, not just the iconic character that made her famous, but the human being who bore the weight of being the only one in a world that didn't know how to make space for her. What's remarkable isn't just what she endured, it's how gracefully she carried it, how fiercely she protected her castmates, even when they didn't fully see her, how long she held on to the truth, not to keep it hidden, but to keep it safe, and how, now, she's allowing it to come forward not with anger, but with reflection, with honesty. There's something powerful in the way she describes her time on MASH today. She doesn't flinch from the truth, but she doesn't turn her back on the show either. She still loves it, still respects it, still feels pride in the work they all did together. But now she's also asking us to look deeper, to remember that even beloved sets, shows that shaped our culture and brought us comfort, can also hold stories of imbalance, of silence, of quiet pain. That the laughter we remember was real, but so was the loneliness in the moments in between. And perhaps that's what makes her story so important to hear now, because Loretta Swit represents a generation of women who showed up, did the work, asked for nothing, and carried more than we ever knew. Women who paved the way simply by surviving in spaces that weren't designed for them, who changed television not with fanfare, but with persistence, who taught us that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits, watches, endures, and when the moment is right, it finally speaks. Loretta Swit is speaking now, not because she wants attention, not because she wants credit, but because she knows that someone, somewhere, needs to hear the truth. That someone might be a young actress walking onto her first set. It might be a longtime fan who thought they knew everything about MASH. Or it might be one of her old castmates, still alive, still listening, who never realized how much she had carried. And maybe, just maybe, hearing it now will make them see her differently. Because Loretta was never just hot lips, never just the token woman, never just a supporting player. She was the heart of MASH. She still is. And now, at 86, she's finally telling the story only she could tell. For more emotional stories, check out this video.